The internet has always been a strange place, a vast digital campfire where people tell stories they would never say out loud, hidden among the camping discussions and video game debates. You'll sometimes stumble across something different, something personal, unsettling, real. The following stories come from actual message board and forum posts, scattered across the web, some dating back years. In many cases, the original posters never returned to explain what happened next. What you'll hear tonight is based on those fragments, expanded for storytelling, but rooted in what someone once felt the need to share with strangers online. These are stories of quiet terror, eerie encounters, and the kind of creeping fear that lingers long after you log off. I was hunting in a new spot, a thick swamp where an oak flat met the water. There was a small grove of head-high palmettos and brush behind my stand, heading into the swamp. I climbed a dogwood tree, hoisted up a platform, and nailed it to an oak about 15 to 20 feet off the ground. I left corn as bait and headed out for the day. 2 weeks later, I returned to hunt. Everything seemed fine as I walked in before daylight, settling into the stand. The corn was gone, and there were fresh hog signs around, but something felt off. I've been in the woods my whole life, camping, hunting, and fishing day or night, but that morning I felt watched. It was hard to shake the feeling, but I didn't think much of it. I just felt on edge. I didn't hear or see any animals that morning until I was climbing down mid-morning. As I was slithering down from the oak to the dogwood, something caught my eye. A crash came from the thicket, and I barely glimpsed something running through the palmettos parallel to me. At first, it looked like a huge brown dog. I even thought buffalo for a split second. The crash was loud. I heard it splash into the water. Sounded like a whole herd of hogs plowing through. I thought it was just a deer jumping and me misjudging the sight, but all the strange feelings stuck with me as I went back to my truck and drove home. That afternoon, around 2 p.m., I went back in for an evening hunt. The air was still, the swamp quiet, way too quiet. After sitting for an hour, I heard splashing across the thicket. At first, I assumed it was hogs, but the closer it got, the more wrong it felt. There was no excited energy, just an uneasy feeling I couldn't shake. The sound got louder, and I realized it wasn't hogs at all. It was one creature, moving slowly through the waist-deep water on the other side of the thicket. I could hear the sound of each footfall. Splash, splash, drip, drip, splash. It was trying to be quiet. I was beginning to wonder if it was another person, but the water was too deep for someone to be walking through it like that. By the time it was close, about 40 yards away, hidden in the thicket, I had my rifle aimed, still unsafe, but my finger on the trigger. I was shaking. And then, just as it reached the edge of the thicket, it crashed through and went silent. No sound, no birds, no frogs, no crickets, just the eerie stillness. I swear I could feel it creeping closer. The silence made my skin crawl. As it started getting dark, I decided to get out of there. I walked backwards all the way out, never taking my eyes off the thicket. I was so rattled that I forgot my bag, my fanny pack, hanging on the nail in the stand. I realized this once I was driving home, but it wasn't until 2 days later that I worked up the nerve to go back for it. This time, I took a shotgun for protection. Even though I wasn't sure it would do any good, I kept my thumb on the hammer the entire walk in. It was midday now, so I figured it would be safer. As I neared the stand, I looked up, and the tree stand was gone. I don't remember seeing the platform on the ground, but the bark around the tree was scratched and clawed to hell. My bag was still hanging on that nail. I didn't look back. I never went back to that swamp. A few years later, it was clear-cut, and they started building houses there. I've told a few people about it, but most didn't believe me. There's only one guy who did, but he won't tell me why. He hunts in the same general area, and I think he might have had his own encounter with whatever it was. It was around 4 a.m., and my husband and I had just returned from a long bike ride. We showered, settled into bed, and fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. Our 2-story house had the bedroom separated by a staircase, with my baby sleeping in the room to the right of the stairs. Our room was around the corner to the left. Out of nowhere, I woke up abruptly, sitting straight up in bed. I had no idea why I'd woken up, but something felt wrong. I felt an overwhelming sense of unease in the pit of my stomach, like something was about to happen. I shook my husband awake, telling him that something was off and he needed to go downstairs and check around. He groggily brushed me off, thinking I'd been startled by the storm. "It's 4 a.m., honey. You probably heard a tree limb or something," he said. The wind howled outside, and the rain that wasn't in the forecast now pounded on the roof. I convinced myself he was right, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I still had this intense urge to go across the hall and grab my 10-month-old son, pulling him into bed with me. If he wasn't going to check, I would. So there I was, holding my son in my arms, lying back down, trying to calm myself. I eventually fell back asleep, but only a few hours later, I woke up to my husband shaking me, sounding more awake now. He apologized for not taking my concerns seriously and told me that our house had been broken into. Someone had broken the window of his car, stolen the garage opener, and used it to get into the garage. They took our bikes and tools, but when they entered the house, they must have been startled. The tools were just sitting on the floor, as if they had been dropped in a rush. They heard me wake up and, in their panic, left quickly. I couldn't believe it. My intuition had stopped them from getting further into the house. It felt like a close call, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that something strange had been in play that night. A few years later, we moved to a new city, a place I was still unfamiliar with. We had only been there 5 months when this strange feeling returned. Our new house was at the end of a deep cul-de-sac, not far from a school. One evening, I was cooking dinner while my boys, now 4 and 6, played nearby. Again, this intense sense of unease washed over me. Something wasn't right, and it was so strong it made me physically ill. I decided to step outside for a minute. I checked on the house 2 doors down from us, which had been empty for a while since the family had gone on vacation. Everything seemed fine, but still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I went back inside, but the feeling only grew stronger. As I was washing dishes, my stomach twisted with dread. I turned off the kitchen light, and just as I was about to leave the kitchen, I saw movement outside through the corner of my eye. I stepped outside, peering through the tall wooden fence in my backyard, and I saw a man sitting on top of a manhole cover in the street. He was dressed in black, almost blending into the night, with a bag by his side. Something didn't sit right. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was staking out the vacant house. Quietly, I called the police. This was before cell phones, so I had to call from the house phone. A bit later, a patrol car drove by. The officers knocked on my door, and I pointed out where the man was sitting. They told me they'd check the area and be back shortly. I felt a little relief, but my sense of unease didn't go away. Then, the phone rang again. It was the police. Their tone was different this time. Urgent. They told me to stay calm, but to lock myself and the kids in the bathroom and not to ask questions. They didn't have time to explain, but they said I was in immediate danger. My heart pounded in my chest as I rushed to gather my boys and took them into the bathroom, locking the door behind me. They told me that while they were checking out the area, another officer had discovered a white van nearby. The van belonged to a dangerous man, one who liked to violate women and even torture them. He was on the run from another country. They had reason to believe he was targeting me, so they were speeding back to my house. I had no idea why I was in the bathroom, but I felt a sense of dread like I've never felt before. As we huddled there in the dark, I heard noises from inside the house, light tapping, almost like someone was moving around. My pulse quickened. I couldn't explain why, but I felt like someone else was in the house. I laid on the floor, trying to stay there as still and quiet as possible, praying the kids wouldn't wake up. I felt trapped, with nowhere to go, but I had no choice but to wait. Then, I heard the police car outside, followed by a loud banging at the door. They yelled and rushed inside. I could hear them running through the house. When they found me, they told me that the man had been watching me for hours. The bag he had with him contained rope, handcuffs, and bandanas, things he used on his previous victims. The police had interrupted his plan, and he fled, jumping a fence. He was eventually caught a week later. If I hadn't trusted my gut, if I hadn't acted on that feeling of dread, I don't know what would have happened. It's strange how some instincts just can't be ignored. That night, they saved me and my children. Back in 2017, I went camping way off the grid, deep in the woods near Mount Rainier, Washington. No official campground, no trail markers, just raw wilderness where I didn't expect to see another soul for miles. One night, I woke up to a sound. Couldn't tell what it was at first. I unzipped my tent, and sitting there, right where my fire had burned out hours earlier, was a man. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting there. No gear, no bag, no flashlight. Just a man. He looked normal enough, nothing particularly remarkable about him, but when he saw me, his eyes went wide like he had seen a ghost, and then he bolted. It rattled me, bad. But by the next day, I'd mostly pushed it out of my mind. Figured maybe he was high, or got turned around somehow, and we'd both ended up in the same spot by dumb luck. That would have been easier, because 2 nights later, and I mean a solid 10 to 15 miles away, deep into different terrain, I was sitting by the fire again, winding down for the night. I started hearing noises, footsteps, a rustle here and there, the unmistakable sense that someone was nearby. I called out, and a voice answered, "Do you know how to get to Bell's Canyon?" The voice was just outside the firelight, like the edge of a dream. I told him, no, I didn't even think that was a real place. But he kept talking, asking weird, disconnected questions from the dark. I tried to spot him with my flashlight, but he barked, "Aim that away." So I did. Because by then, I was already on edge, and I didn't want to provoke whoever this was. 15 minutes went by like that. Just me, a fire, and a stranger somewhere in the dark. Then the voice drifted closer. I couldn't take it anymore. I aimed my light in that direction, and it was him. The same guy from 2 nights before. Same clothes, same wide-eyed stare. And once again, he took off, crashing through the brush like some wild animal. This time, I chased him. Maybe 100 feet, maybe 2, but I stopped. I knew better than to get lost in the woods at night, chasing a ghost. But this time, I knew it wasn't random. There was no way he could have ended up there by chance. Not in that terrain. Not without gear. Not 15 miles later. The man had followed me. The next morning, I packed up and hiked out. It took me 3 days. Every hour of it, I felt like I was being tracked. I doubled back constantly, took odd paths, left no sign. I even stopped a few times to hide and wait, just to see if he'd come into view. He never did, but the feeling stayed. That first night out, I heard someone circling my tent, twice. Slow footsteps in the brush. But when I finally unzipped the tent to look, nothing. The second night, I heard howling in the distance. At first, I thought it was an animal, but the longer I listened, the more I was convinced it was a person. Someone imitating an animal. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks. Maybe it wasn't. But by the time I saw my car again, I could have cried from the sheer relief. I've never felt anything like it. I don't know who that man was. I don't know what he wanted. And I have no way of knowing how long he was watching me, or how close he might have gotten when I was asleep. But those few days, I've never felt more hunted in my life. I had a strange encounter a few years back. One I still can't explain. I've posted about it before on here, but I wanted to share it again. At the time, I was camping in the Mendocino National Forest in California. There were only 5 of us at the site. Me, my girlfriend, a single friend, and another friend with his wife. The night started out normal enough. My married friend went to bed early. He and his wife were sleeping in the back of his pickup under a camper shell. Me and the other guy decided to watch a movie on a laptop, while the girls stayed by the campfire. Maybe halfway through the movie, the girls suddenly started screaming. I turned around just in time to see them practically tripping over each other, running away from the fire towards us. Now, being that far out in the forest, we always go armed. At the time, I was the only one carrying a firearm, but everyone had knives. We asked what happened. They said while they were sitting by the fire, they heard something crashing through the brush towards them. Something big, by the sound of it. Me and my buddy grabbed flashlights and checked the area. We searched all around behind the bushes where they had pointed, but found nothing. Now, there are elk in that part of the forest, but they usually stay hundreds of yards away from people. They don't come running towards campfires. I started wondering if it might have been some redneck creep messing with us, so I kept my rifle nearby, and we all stayed alert. The girls stuck a lot closer to us after that. Around 2:30 in the morning, the fire had mostly burned down, and we decided to call it a night. The wife climbed back into the truck, my single friend went to his tent, and me and my girlfriend went to ours. I put my rifle away, but I kept my pistol right beside me. My girlfriend fell asleep pretty quickly. I could hear my buddy snoring a few yards away. I lay there for maybe 10 minutes, trying to fall asleep. And that's when I heard it. Anyone who spent time outdoors knows the sound of footsteps on dirt and rocks. That's what I heard. A slow, deliberate, bipedal walking sound. No more than 5 feet from my tent. It was creeping from outside the campsite, moving in. At first, I thought it might be some forest person, or another camper looking to steal something. I quietly nudged my girlfriend and whispered, "Do you hear this?" She opened her eyes, listened for a second, and whispered back, "Yes, what is it?" We lay there in total silence, listening as it moved from the side of our tent straight toward the entrance, still no more than 5 to 10 feet away. I reached over to grab my pistol, brushing slightly against the tent fabric. That small noise, just brushing against the vinyl, caused the footsteps to immediately stop. We laid there, listening. Nothing. Total silence. Whoever or whatever it was just standing there. Minutes passed. My girlfriend whispered that she had to pee, which given the situation was terrible timing, but I knew I'd have to move eventually anyway. In one quick motion, I sat up, unzipped the tent, and pointed my flashlight and pistol right where the noise had been. There was nothing there. I could see clear across the campsite. Nothing moved. Nothing was hiding behind the trees. It was like whatever had been there had just vanished. I stepped out of the tent, scanning everywhere with the flashlight. I found no tracks, no disturbed dirt, no sign that anyone had been there at all. Meanwhile, my girlfriend took care of her business right next to the tent. There was no way she was walking off into the dark. As we stood there, still listening for any sound, we heard it. Rapid gunfire off in the distance. Now mind you, this is a national forest where hunting is allowed, but it was almost 3 a.m. Who hunts at 3 a.m.? And who fires 15 to 20 shots like that? Even stranger, midway through the gunfire, we heard the most god-awful screaming. It didn't sound human. It was almost like a squeal, like a pig being tortured. It echoed across the forest, and it was loud enough that even from a mile or 2 away, it made our blood run cold. We stood there frozen, listening, until the sounds faded away. Eventually, we crawled back into the tent. Neither of us slept well that night. I was in Juneau, Alaska once, traveling on business. After work, I decided to drive north out of town, just exploring. I stopped randomly at different beaches, just enjoying the quiet, soaking in the landscape. At one of these stops, I wandered down onto a beach by myself. The tide was low, the air was crisp, and birds were fishing out in the surf. I spent some time poking around in the tidal pools, just enjoying the solitude. I was completely alone. Or so I thought. After a while, a truck pulled into the parking lot above me. The lot sat on a bluff, about 50 feet higher than the beach. At first, I didn't think much of it, but the truck didn't park. Instead, it spun a Brody, a full-on donut, and then roared off to the north. Weird, but whatever. I kept walking along the beach, further from the trail. A few minutes later, the truck came back. This time, it pulled into the same overlook and just sat there. No one got out. It was too far away to make out details, but I could feel it. I was being watched. Then, with another spray of gravel, it peeled out and headed off to the south. Now I was uneasy. I decided I'd seen enough and started heading back towards the trail that led up to my car. But just as I was about to leave the beach, the truck returned. Third time. This time, it parked head on, with its headlights pointed straight at me. It was getting close to dusk, and I felt pinned by the beams. The truck idled for a moment, then peeled out again, but I didn't hear it leave. Instead, I heard the engine cut off, right where my car was parked. Every instinct in me screamed one word: hide. I didn't go back up the trail. I turned and disappeared into the woods, scrambling uphill through the trees. Juneau's forests are thick, towering evergreens, dense undergrowth, deadfall everywhere. I found a tree that had fallen long ago and laid down behind it, pressing myself into the ground. I was wearing a bright blue jacket. Even in the fading light, I knew I stuck out like a sore thumb. I had no weapon, can't fly with one, and my phone barely had signal. I was completely alone, out of sight, and utterly exposed. Then I heard it. 2 doors. There were at least 2 people. They waited for a while, probably expecting me to come up the trail, but when I didn't, they started down. I heard their footsteps crunching on gravel, on dead leaves. One of them had something in his hands. Long, solid. Could have been a bat. Could have been a rifle. I couldn't tell in the dim light. And then one of them called out, "Hello, where are you?" It was chilling. They were looking for me. I stayed still, heart pounding so loud, I thought it would give me away. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I waited until their voices and footsteps faded down toward the beach. Only then did I start to move. Slowly, quietly, crawling uphill through the woods towards the parking lot. I tried not to make noise, but it was impossible. The forest floor was dry, covered in brittle twigs and dead leaves. Somehow, they didn't hear me. When I finally reached the lot, the truck was still there. Dark windows, completely tinted. I couldn't see inside. For all I knew, someone was still sitting in the driver's seat, watching. I didn't wait to find out. I jumped in my car, fired up the engine, and tore out of there like my life depended on it. Because I think it did. I've hiked alone all my life. I've been in the deep wilderness, far more remote than that spot, just outside of Juneau. But I've never felt that kind of danger I felt that night. To this day, I don't think I overreacted. I'm certain, if those men had found me, something very bad would have happened. This happened not too long after I turned 16. My dad was working up in Oregon and Washington, based out of Rainier. I'd gone up there to live with him, mostly just to do something different. I was used to city lights, cars, noise, things to do, and out there, it didn't take long before boredom set in like the damp. Now the country girls around that part of Oregon, they weren't hard on the eyes, and they knew it. But most of them were getting drunk, getting high, or doing dumb things, like cow tipping or shooting at cargo ships floating down the Columbia River, which, don't get me wrong, I wasn't exactly against back then. But it just wasn't enough. I missed concrete, neon, and some sense of purpose. Then, I wrecked a car. Not just any wreck. Went off the side of a mountain. Whole story on its own. I figured my dad was going to kill me when he found out. Might not even give me the courtesy of a blindfold. So instead of facing that, I figured I'd hitchhike back to Oklahoma. Now, I didn't quite understand how far Oregon was from Oklahoma. Not till I was already deep into this misadventure. A buddy of mine came along. He had just pissed off his folks too, and saw this as a grand escape. So there we were, thumbing it down I-84, somewhere between Portland and the Dalles. Back then, it was just 2 lanes through there, and we were dead tired. Hitchhiking turned out to be mostly just walking. Should have been called hike, hitch, hike. My feet hated me. Anyway, we saw a spot off the road where we could maybe catch some sleep. The fences out there were weirdly well maintained. Not a house in sight, not a soul, but fences neat as a pin. Middle of nowhere, yet someone was minding the property lines. Spooked me a little, but I was too tired to care. Moon was out, lighting everything with a black and white film. We were about 3/4 of a mile from the last bend, and about the same from the next, in a little valley that cut through the hills. Quiet, still, and just eerie enough to make the hair on your arms think twice. Right as we were fixing to hop the fence, a car came around the bend ahead of us. Too far off to see yet, but we didn't want to be spotted in case we were trespassing. So we slid down the gravel embankment on our side of the road. Steep little sucker, about 15 feet down. We were well out of sight. As we slid, I caught something moving across the road, just on the other side. Lit up for a moment in the car's headlights. It was fast, dropped down the embankment opposite us, towards the river. I asked my buddy if he saw it, and he said, yeah, he saw something. As the car passed, we crept up to peek. Right as we were about to step onto the road again, we saw what looked like 2 people pushing a motorbike up an embankment from the riverside, right where we saw the thing go down. We froze. Didn't make no sense. That slope was steeper than ours, and it went all the way to the river. You don't just push a bike up that. It'd be hell even without gravity working against you. Then, it stood up. It wasn't 2 people, and it wasn't a motorbike. It was something that had been on all 4s, and when it stood, it was massive, at least twice as tall as we were, and we weren't exactly tiny. I looked at my buddy, saw that same wide-eyed panic I was feeling. We were both doing the math. I couldn't outrun it, but he was carrying the pack. Maybe it'd go for him first. Lord forgive me for thinking it, but I sure did. We ducked back down and got real still. I pulled out a little pocket knife. He pulled out a fork. Yeah, we were gonna die, and die stupid. It came closer. We heard it stop, almost directly across from us. I could barely breathe. Wind was blowing in our faces. Maybe that helped. Maybe it couldn't smell us. It stood there for a minute, then moved on, heading up the road in the direction we'd came from. Right about the time it disappeared from sight, another car came around the bend. Lights lit up the hillside again, and just like before, it dipped off the road and vanished down the bank. This time, it didn't come back up. We waited a long time before we moved, long enough for our legs to feel like cement. Finally climbed up, walked on quiet like, didn't say nothing till we were miles down the road, breathing easy. Made it to the Dalles and called home. That was it. We were done playing Nomad in the Oregon night. Back in the winter of 2001, my youngest son and I were driving from Boise, Idaho, down to Medford, Oregon. We had a trailer in tow, hauling his non-running Jeep from his old place to his new one. Somewhere in southern Cascades, around 2 in the morning, we hit a stretch of heavy snow. It took us about 45 minutes to make it down off the mountain. We'd been drinking coffee non-stop to stay alert, and about 25 miles west of the pass, it became very clear that all that caffeine had caught up with us. We needed to stop. We pulled into a wide turnout near a seasonal tourist stop, an ice cream place, and a gas station that were both closed for the winter. There wasn't a town or settlement for 30 miles in any direction. Just timber. Big, silent, cold trees. I stepped out of the truck, 45 on my hip, and something deep in my gut told me to grab the Mossberg 590 as well. No real reason, just instinct. We walked to the far end of the clearing, away from the road, and the moment we stepped into that snow, every hair on my neck and arms stood straight up. I mean, straight up. The area in front of us was wide open, maybe 50 yards deep, and 100 across. The snow was fresh, maybe 8 or 10 inches deep. The moon was nearly full, and the night was bitter cold, but you could see clearly. While we stood there, relieving ourselves, my son about 15 feet to my right, it was like the ground in front of us erupted. 10, maybe 12 figures shot into view like they just appeared out of nowhere. They were fast, damn fast, and not human. Easily 7 feet tall, bipedal, thin with long arms and medium-length gray fur. They weren't running straight toward us, but weaving back and forth across the clearing in this strange, almost military pattern, like a thatch weave. Fast, coordinated like a hunting pack. I should mention, this whole time, from the moment I stepped out of that truck, I'd had this deep, primal dread crawling up my spine. A feeling that I can only describe as, we were prey. Whatever these things were, they weren't just watching us. They were hunting us. I slid the safety off the shotgun. My son had already drawn his .45. We started backing toward the truck, slow, deliberate. I refused to turn my back. The creatures peeled off from the main group, fanning out right and left. They were trying to encircle us. I could feel them, could even smell them. That thick, animal smell that hits you right in the gut. But the strangest part, they made no sound. Not a single footfall. Total silence. Until the very end. We reached the truck, our adrenaline spiked to the max. I've already unlocked the doors, keys in hand. As soon as I was seated, I fired up the engine, slammed it into gear, and punched the gas. We pulled out of there so fast, tires spitting snow behind us. As we tore back onto the highway, something just off the road let out this ululating scream. Rage, pain, something primal. I'm pretty sure one of them got too close, and I ran over its foot in our escape. Yeah, they were that close. I told my son to keep eyes on the truck bed and trailer. He already had the shotgun trained on the rear. We didn't let up for 20 solid miles. Not until that awful feeling of danger finally started to fade. Later, we talked about it, and we both agreed. The strongest feeling we had that night was the sense that we were being hunted, that if we had hesitated, if we had stayed even a moment longer, we'd have been killed, slaughtered, maybe eaten. Now look, I'm not someone who jumps at shadows. I'm not a true believer in Bigfoot or werewolves or ghosts. I'm a skeptic by nature. My son's the same way, but we both saw them. We both felt them. We smelled them. And it was real. 6 months later, my son was talking with a coworker who had grown up in Prospect, Oregon, about 30 miles south of Union Creek, where it all happened. He asked the guy if he'd ever seen anything strange up there. The man went pale, and then repeated our story almost word for word. Told him, don't go near that place at night. A family friend, a retired cop of 25 years, sharp-eyed, and not one for wild stories, had his own experience in the same exact area, the year before ours. Just as strange, just as terrifying. When I told my wife what had happened, she looked at me like I'd grown a third eye. Not because she didn't believe me, but because the story chilled her to the bone. It still gives me chills too, even writing this now. The hair on my neck is standing up just thinking about it. I haven't gone back, and I won't. Not without a very large group of heavily armed men at my side. As far as I know, nothing matches what we saw. Not in any official record, unless you're willing to dive deep into old legends, the folklore, the things that aren't supposed to exist. All I can say is, like Elmer Keith once said, hell, I was there.